Is the obscene price for this absolutely amazing fragrance worth it? I've never been so torn. Hello, welcome back to Seldomly Often. I'm Daniel, today we're talking fragrances, and this is a practical review of Xerjoff Richwood. These reviews are for fragrances I have a lot of experience with, multiple wears in many situations, and I meant to give you a general idea of what it feels to wear the fragrance. As per usual, despite me doing a lot of research before buying these fragrances, I don't really like to go into details about notes and accords, as I don't think that they help the end user. I'd rather talk about the wear experience as a whole. I guess we're back on the Xerjoff fragrance train sooner than expected. Not really sure why. I guess I have a newfound appreciation for the vibe of the house. I've been sampling a lot of stuff. And I don't know, I just like the house. It's a fun house to sample and it's a fun house to experience. Richwood is one of the most impressive fragrances from the house of Xerjoff so far, and by far, it's easily one of my favorites from the house, although it kind of leaves me puzzled because it's not really in character for the house. Meaning that Xerjoff is mostly known for their very flashy, very mass appealing, very over-the-top type of fragrances. They're all incredibly wow-inducing, they're all incredibly characterful, and they're just a fun time. And Richwood doesn't really fit that profile. Richwood is more of a really elegant, really refined, really well put together perfume that doesn't feel at home on this brand. And I'm fully aware that Richwood is actually one of the first fragrances from the brand of Xerjoff, and I guess they still were in the discovery innovation phase and didn't really know what they were or what they were creating. Richwood, by the way, is from the Stone collection, the 1717 collection. It's by far the most luxurious and most expensive fragrance line from the house, and you can easily distinguish the bottles because they have this stone engraving instead of the usual metal plaque. But yeah, this is just to say that Richwood is not necessarily something that you'll find on many lists because it's so freaking expensive and so not easy to get. It's actually quite a rare find at discounters. I was very lucky enough to get this through a trade. I would have never purchased this on my own because, again, 50 mls around my parts run for, at discounters this is, for about 350 bucks. And 350 bucks for a Xerjoff, I'm not really sure about that. Also, what made me unsure was the fact that I've never smelled this in real life, and despite having done my research about this and knowing kind of what to expect, I didn't really know how this would perform in reality, not only scent profile wise, but also throughout the wear experience and performance wise. I was kind of worried, so yeah, not blind buy safe. Again, I was very fortunate to come across this in a trade. And when I finally got this, and I was very excited about getting this, by the way, I sprayed it on skin and I was left kind of puzzled. I didn't really know what to expect, or rather, I knew that this was supposed to smell in a certain way, but I wasn't really expecting what I got. And it took me a while to really get back to this scent because, again, it doesn't really fit the Xerjoff character. It's not one of those fragrances that immediately transports you to this fun realm, to this like party mode. It's not that at all. This is first and foremost a very elegant fragrance, as I said. It's very perfumey. It's one of the least evocative fragrances in my collection. The evocative and narration factor of Xerjoff Richwood is basically on par with stuff like MFK. It's that kind of fragrance. It's designed in the same kind of way. It's a very beautiful, very complex, very long-lasting, incredibly well-designed fragrance. But again, the first time I smelled it, I was a little bit almost disappointed to a degree. But as it turns out, the more wears I was putting into this, the closer I was getting to this fragrance, both in understanding and both in liking it. This is now one of my favorite fragrances from the brand, and also probably one of my favorite elegant, perfumey perfumes that I have in my collection. Every time I talk about a Xerjoff fragrance, I have to mention the perfumer. Oftentimes it's not even disclosed, and that's something that I really hate about the brand. Other times, it's the usual Chris Maurice, and as you may know, I'm not a huge fan of his work for Xerjoff. Whenever he follows a brief for Xerjoff, he tends to fall into his usual habits. A lot of his fragrances from the brand smell kind of similar, especially in the dry down. not necessarily to my liking. But all that being said, I have to admit that Chris Maurice is actually a very good perfumer, and his other work that he does for other brands is to my liking, and some of them are actually really interesting. But I definitely want to talk about the perfumer, because in this case for Richwood, it is not Chris Maurice, it's actually Jacques Flori. I'm not super familiar with his work, so I don't really know what else he done, but I'm very happy he put his hands on Richwood, because again, it's a very unique scent and it wears differently from any other Xerjoff in the lineup, any other Xerjoff that I tried at the very least. And I don't know, it's just very unique, and the out of brandness is a little bit jarring, but overall I think that this offering is high quality, it's well designed, and it's definitely worth a sniff. We also have to talk about the other massive elephant in the room, and it's the fact that many people consider this to be a very blatant copy of Chanel's Coromandel. And I've talked about this in a past review, maybe, in a past video definitely, and I said that I didn't really recall what Coromandel smelled like, because it's been a really long time and I have a very hazy memory of it. But in light of this review, I actually purchased a sample of the new Coromandel ADP, or the current Coromandel ADP, just to compare it. And actually today I've been wearing it on my right arm while I've been wearing Xerjoff Richwood on my left arm. So I have a very clear idea of how they compare. Yes, I have to admit that Xerjoff, when creating Richwood, took a massive page out of Chanel's book when it comes to Coromandel inspiration, but I also have to say that they smell different enough that they're not necessarily a copy of each other. They're just two different takes on the same DNA. The kudos definitely go to Chanel for inventing this DNA, or at least making it very popular. But Xerjoff did a great job in reinventing the wheel, because they added a lot of character and made it very interesting. But we're going to talk about the scent profile and wear experience after we cover the presentation. At the cost of sounding like a broken record, I have to keep repeating myself. The presentation for Xerjoff is always absolutely top tier, and in the case of the 1717 Stone collection, it's even more so. The bottles for this are absolutely flawless. There's no defect to be found. They're super high quality, they feel high quality, they're heavy, they're insanely well made. The glass is pristine, beautifully transparent, there are no seams from the mold. Everything is just perfect. I feel that the only part of the presentation where you can have a bad opinion is the box these come in. It's your usual Xerjoff coffin. In this case, for the Stone Label collection, they are wrapped in this white snake leather type of thing. It's incredibly tacky and over the top, almost to an exaggerated degree. Within the box itself, you also find a batch code number and some sort of a serial number, I guess for exclusivity. But yeah, it's expensive. Objectively, it's a little bit over the top, but it's your typical Xerjoff. But when it comes to the bottle, once again, you really can't complain. And as I mentioned before, the fragrances from the 1717 collection are insanely recognizable because of this stone label instead of the metal plaque that is up front. It's very beautiful. Again, I don't know what this stone is, but this is placed into a metal frame, which is incredibly solid. It's super refined. Again, everything is incredibly high quality. Cap is your usual Xerjoff cap. Very shiny, very fingerprint prone. It's heavy, it's beautiful, it's well made. Zero complaints. The atomizer assembly for Xerjoff is always also top tier. It perfectly combines the diffuseness of a pressurized sprayer with a massive jet that is easy to aim and that sprays a ton of liquid. It's an absolute joy to use. Let's give it a couple sprays. By the way, the performance for Richwood is deceivingly strong. You don't really realize this until 8 to 10 hours down the road, when you all of a sudden just smell the fragrance again, almost like you just sprayed it. It's very long lasting, very powerful. There's really no way around it. The overall presentation for Xerjoff Richwood is hard to complain about. It's flawless. It's expensive, yes. The user is paying for it, yes. But we've had that conversation before. It really comes down to the brand's identity, and you might disagree on the fact that it needs to be so flashy and so over the top. But it is what it is. At the very least, it feels luxurious. It feels like you're getting what you're paying for. When talking about the pricing again, because it's a very difficult to ignore subject when talking about the stone collections from Xerjoff, yes, Richwood is very stupidly priced. You could say it's overpriced. We have to talk about that later in the scent profile, but overall, it's insanely out of reach for most people. I think that these also come in 100 ml bottles. This one here is a 50 ml, by the way. This would make it even more expensive. And I seem to remember that the 100 ml goes for about 500, 550 bucks. That would make them even more expensive than the Amouage Exceptional X-Rates. That's a hard sell, especially for Richwood, because it's such a unique, very different type of fragrance. I'm not really sure how much this is selling for the brand. I'm not really sure how much the Stone Collection is selling for the brand. And I already mentioned this when talking about Symphonium. Your mileage may vary, money is very subjective, but overall, it's really hard to recommend these. Okay, it's time to talk about the scent profile and wear experience for Xerjoff Richwood. What does this actually smell like? To quickly summarize the scent profile for Richwood and to sort of box it into a category, I have to say that this is a 4-season, medium density rose fragrance, very, very elegant, with a deep, rich, sweet, ambery patchouli base. I know it's a mouthful, but this is pretty much what it is. It's a complex fragrance that is actually quite unique, maybe except for Coromandel. It's very, very elegant, it's very well put together, it's very well designed, and super, super smooth and balanced. As I also mentioned, this fragrance took quite a bit of getting used to before I fully appreciated it. The first time I smelled it, I already knew I liked it, but I didn't really know how to define it. In a very similar way how you smell for the first time something like Chanel No. 5, and you don't really know what's in there. It's so beautifully blended and put together that it just comes off as a beautiful perfume, and this is kind of the same thing. It's very difficult to isolate notes, and it's very difficult to understand what this is. Again, it's not really evocative in a similar way to MFK. It just smells good. It just smells like a good perfume. And this is strikingly different from many other Xerjoff offerings that are much more direct in their imagery. Even something like Herbavura is basically a basket of fruit. It's really hard to ignore that fact. This is a lot more subtle, it's a lot more nuanced, it's a lot more grown up and complex. So let me try to break down the various phases of this fragrance while trying to be as descriptive as possible. First of all, actually, I have to say that this fragrance does not have many phases. It doesn't really transition much. You get everything all at once. And although it does have an evolution per se, it's a very predictable, very standard evolution for fragrances. If there's an edginess up front, the edginess becomes smooth and everything gets rounded off. So yeah, it's not really designed to be transitioning or narrative. This is a beautiful fragrance that is meant to stay beautiful as much as possible. And what you get when you first initially spray this is, I would say rose. Rose is easily the most detectable and the most recognizable ingredient in Richwood. It's definitely not a prominent rose. It's not like Lyric Man by Amouage, it's not like Portrait of a Lady, it's not like Oud Satin Mood. It's more of a rosy type of feeling. I have to say that this smells a little bit mature in a way. This is one of the most mature roses that are out there in a very, very elegant way. And I don't mean old lady mature, I mean just refined mature. This is a very powdery, very classy, very elegant, very light pink type of rose. It's not shouty, it's not screechy, it's not in your face, it's not metallic. It's just velvety smooth, very, very elegant. And probably the texture of this rose is due to the many supporting ingredients. Again, this is a very complex fragrance, and I don't really like to go into details about the notes because I don't know. First of all, I can't really detect the notes, and second of all, it's not really useful. But overall, the warm aspect of this fragrance really translates to this rose. I think that the feature that makes this fragrance so difficult to break down is the fact that the whole scent profile basically sits in the mid-tone of the tone range, and everything is just kind of like on top of each other. There are no defined layers to it. This can be seen as a positive or negative, but in a fragrance that is designed to wear like this, that is designed to smell like this, I feel it's an overwhelmingly positive aspect. There's something magical about not really knowing what is in a perfume. It places it above you. It places it as something that you don't understand, that you're just kind of using and experiencing. It's really cool, and Xerjoff Richwood perfectly nails that aspect. I'm really trying hard here to break this down because my brain wants to really ignore the details and wants to just take it in as is. But again, really digging in there, I'm getting a lot of mintiness, a lot of balsamicness. There is a very fresh aspect to this fragrance. The minty freshness here is a little bit earthy, so I'm not really sure if it's coming from the patchouli or from something like a geranium or actual mint, but it has some character, it has some edge. It's not screechy at all. It's very, very smooth and elegant, but it knows what it is, and it's very characterful. And this is basically the main difference between Richwood and Coromandel EDP. Coromandel smells like your idea of what the dry down for Richwood would smell like. You basically take Richwood, put it into one of those tumbler polishing things with the stones, those cylinders that turn, and you get back to it after 24 hours and you get a very smooth version of Richwood. Much more tame, much more subtle. Some may say much more elegant, some others may say much more boring. That's for you to decide. But overall, yes, Richwood has a lot more edginess, has a lot more zing, has a lot more character than Coromandel in my opinion. And that's what makes it really unique. And I like Richwood a lot more than Coromandel. Spoiler alert, I have worn this a lot though, and I do appreciate its subtle elegance, but Richwood is just more exciting while still being very classy and very upscale. Going back to the wear experience for Richwood, yes, it's very, very difficult to break apart. So the opening has this very slight, elegant edge, and as the scent dries down, this edge sort of just gets more mellow and more smooth. In the deep dry down, which is actually 6 hours plus down the road, Richwood is in its smoothest state. It's never subtle, it never becomes a true skin scent, it never becomes unnoticeable. It still retains a lot of character, a lot of edge, a lot of presence. It's surprisingly potent, even deep down there. After a full days of wear, in the evening, you still get whiffs of this, and it really catches you by surprise because it's unusual for a scent to be so present and so noticeable at the end of the day. And this is where Richwood feels very, very high quality and almost worth it. Again, we're going back to the price aspect of this, and I'm a little bit torn because yes, it's stupid overpriced. It is very, very expensive, but at the same time, every time I wear this, I feel like I have an experience which is really, really unlike any other fragrance out there. I only get stuff like this from the most concentrated, the most expensive, the most well-known amouage. It's incredibly eye-opening to a degree, and it's really not Xerjoff's character. Just to wrap up the comparison with Coromandel, yes, Xerjoff is a little bit more of a spiky, edgy version of Coromandel. It's almost Coromandel with auto-tune. It's almost Coromandel with a nice equalizer on it. It's punchy, it has a lot of clarity, it has a lot of definition. It's the modern version, basically. It's a little bit more masculine given these edgy aspects, but this is still extremely unisex. Coromandel wears also a lot more powdery, it's a lot more subtle, and it's a lot more soft on the skin. This one here is a little bit more oily, and despite this, I still feel that this is a 4-season wear. It's good for year-round. It's very, very elegant, so it's not really signature scent worthy. You can't wear this on a day-to-day basis. I mean, unless you're made of money and you do a really high upscale job. But yeah, other than that, this is an incredibly good, versatile fragrance. Speaking of versatility, let's talk about the practicalities. And again, starting with performance, this thing is absolutely massive. Not only the longevity is incredible, as I was describing before, because you can really smell this even 12 hours down the road and smell it well at that. It's really unusual. But the projection on this is, it's similar to Zefiro in the way I described Zefiro, meaning that when you first spray it, it's not super loud. And this is kind of almost a put off because again, you paid a ton of money for this and you spray it and you're like, oh, is this it? But the cool thing about this is that the projection really never fades. And when it does eventually fade, it fades so slowly and so subtly that even in the deepest dry down, you still have presence and edge and character. So yes, performance on this is absolutely magical. It's one of the best performances that I've ever smelled in perfumery. And if you're still fixated on the kind of mediocre projection up front, you have to understand that this is a very luxurious, very subtle, very mature, very upscale fragrance. And if it was shouty, it would probably be losing a lot of its elegance. As I was mentioning before when talking about versatility and use cases, Xerjoff Richwood is actually quite versatile within the elegant type of realm. If you're into elegant stuff, if you spend your days at the golf club and just riding horses and being with your buddies, playing bridge, absolutely, this is a beautiful scent. By all means, you can signature scent this. Even at the office, this is a banger, but it's almost too much. It's almost too opulent, too luxurious to be worn at an office, unless you're like the CEO or have some very, very noticeable position. This is a little bit too much. And not that I feel self-conscious wearing this at the office, because I have worn this at the office a lot, but it feels like a waste. Maybe I'm still conditioned by the price of this, but it's actually also the scent profile that is so elegant that doesn't really work well with my job per se. I have a very normal computer job. It's pretty much in the IT tech world, and this feels a little bit out of place for me. But when the evening comes, when the party starts, and when the elegance is needed, this definitely does not disappoint. It's one of the most beautiful, elegant, subtle, and just luxurious scents that I've ever tried. It's right up there with Jubilation 40. Jubilation from Amouage is obviously a lot more Middle Eastern. It's a lot more loud in a way. It's a lot more characterful. But again, it comes with the Middle Eastern vibe in a Western type of culture. This smells very, very French. It smells incredibly elegant and well designed, very, very luxurious. Again, it smells kind of like Corondel, but just apply that equalizer, apply that V curve, apply that punchiness, bring out the bass and the highs, and you get Xerjoff Richwood. When it comes to demographics, I have to say that first and foremost, this is incredibly unisex. Anyone could pretty much pull this off. But age-wise, this definitely leans a little bit more mature. It's very, very elegant. It's very, very luxurious. And those are two things that don't really apply to the younger crowd. But I also feel that a younger crowd needs a lot more of a direct imagery, a very clear picture of what's going on. And this, again, comes across as a little bit Chanel No. 5-esque in the way that it smells just like a good perfume. And it might come across as a little bit old-fashioned and vintagey to more younger folk. And just to recap the narration and storytelling aspect of Richwood, this is not that at all. It's a very perfumey perfume, very similar in the style of MFK, but a lot more involved, a lot more fatiguing in a way. MFK manages to seamlessly blend in the background. They're very easy things to wear. Richwood never fades into the background. It's always there for you, and it's always very, very apparent that you're wearing this. And that's probably the aspect that makes it incompatible with my job, because it's always there. I'm always aware of it, and I'm always aware of the fact that I'm kind of out of place with it, and I'm definitely not dressed up to the Richwood standards. Okay, we're at that point of the review where I present you some options for the fragrance that I'm talking about. For Richwood, given the fact that it's so unique in my collection, I didn't really know what to go for. So I decided to go a little bit more predictable and to feature fragrances that have a rose in them, but that also have very beautiful, warm, supporting notes that come across as incredibly wearable year-round and that can be signature scented. And my first option for Richwood is a very unsurprising Frederic Malle Portrait of a Lady. This does not smell like Richwood whatsoever. None of my options really do, but this has the same sort of a beautiful, impactful elegance. It's very, very luxurious. I do feel that this is a little bit more casual and more wearable on a day-to-day basis. The rose in here is a little bit more edgy, a little bit more metallic and zingy. The base notes for this, instead of being those incredibly luxurious, soft, pillowy ambery notes, here we have more, again, dry woody notes that have a little bit more character. I feel that this is surprisingly more masculine, more modern, and just overall more wearable. And again, this is personal. I absolutely love Portrait of a Lady. To me, it's one of the best fragrances out there, one of the best fragrances ever made, and one of the most perfect fragrances on the market. But yeah, I think that the overall vibe of this is actually quite comparable to Richwood, although a little bit more modern. Yes, it's crazy in that way. In any situation where Richwood would be appropriate, Portrait of a Lady could just absolutely keep up. It's a beautiful, elegant scent. I absolutely love it. This is my reference rose in my collection. It's my favorite rose ever. And yeah, I just can't replace this. And as much as I love Richwood, this has a very, very special place in my heart, and it has to be sampled by anyone who is into fragrances. My second option for Richwood still pokes around that rose that Richwood features, that very beautiful balanced rose. We're talking about Miller Harris Scherzo. This is a very unique type of fragrance. It has sort of the same Portrait of a Lady type of vibe, but it takes that and just freshens it up, makes it more daytime use, makes it more fun, makes it a little bit more youthful. And it is a little bit feminine leaning, I have to say, especially compared to other things on my collection that have this sort of scent profile. But it's a very fun, it's a very zingy type of fragrance. This is an absolute beautiful wearable experience that I can't recommend enough to anyone that is into that rose patchouli type of fragrance space, but that really wants to cut out that musty, stale type of feeling, that heaviness from the patchouli and from the very dry woods. This is a fun scent. I really, really like it. And I actually been wearing it quite a lot. And I'll be wearing it even more as the spring comes and as the summer comes. My third fragrance option is usually the oddball, and this one here definitely fits that style. We're talking about Bohoboco Yellow Rose Incense. Now, it's not an oddball per se, but compared to the other stuff, this does not really compare to Richwood. It's definitely nowhere near as elegant. It still has a very smooth, very mature, very relaxing type of aspect. It's quite perfumey, but instead of having that patchouli ambery base that really warms up that rose, this one here substitutes that with very smoky, very white, very relaxing type of incense. This is surprisingly comparable to the likes of Amouage Rose Incense. Obviously, it's not as complex, not as structured, not as well defined, and not as well put together, but it's still fun and it still has the same sort of vibe. I really like this. This smells again, it smells fresh, it smells clean. The rose in here is very, very light, it's very powdery. The incense is sweet, it's enveloping, it's relaxing. It's pretty much it. Again, this thing does not evolve too much, but the longevity is good. It's well beyond standards, and the projection is also good. This is a fun wear experience. And if you're into that rose incense type of aspect, this is a high recommendation, especially given the fact that Bohoboco is not too stupid expensive. I can get these at discounters for $100-ish. So yeah, I mean, lasts a long time, very fun, very nice, and it's actually quite classy, super unisex. Give it a try. But back to Richwood with my final overview and recommendation. Again, this is a very difficult fragrance to talk about mainly because of the price point. So my recommendation is kind of on hold. It's a beautiful scent. I really can't fault it as a scent per se. It's a little bit out of character for Xerjoff, but it doesn't really matter at this point because the Stone Collection itself is also out of character for Xerjoff. It doesn't really fit the Xerjoff fun lifestyle type of approach. I don't know, what else can I say other than the fact that this is a beautiful perfume. This is a beautiful perfumer perfume, super well designed, super well put together, very, very elegant, luxurious. It really has everything. And the wear experience with the constant type of projection, the constant type of presence, it's so wow inducing, it's so high quality. It really fits the price point on that side. The scent itself really fits the price point. Can I ultimately recommend this? I'm not really sure. All I can say is that if money is no object, by all means, go ahead, purchase this, you'll like it. Actually, don't purchase this, get a sample because this is not blind buy safe. You might find it a little bit too elegant, a little bit too mature, a little bit too vintagey. It's beautiful, I do like it. If you like the idea of this, if you like Coromandel but are kind of longing for a little bit more edge, a little bit more character and performance, then this is blind buy safe because it's similar enough to be compatible. I'll just close this off by saying that Xerjoff Richwood is definitely a highlight of the house for me. It doesn't really speak to Xerjoff specifically, but at this point it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter who put it on the market, who perfumed it, how it was designed. All that matters is that this is an insanely good fragrance. This is, in some regards, especially in this modern fragrance space, with all these aroma chemicals, all these synthetic notes that kind of boost longevity and they boost presence. This is a breath of fresh air, and a lot of fragrances should just aim to be half as good as this. Get yourself a sample, you will not regret it, even to just know what this is. If you like this type of content, if you like my approach to video, feel free to subscribe. It always helps the channel and it's massively appreciated. If you want to interact with me, leave a comment, suggestion, opinion, or anything else down below. I always reply and I always keep the conversation open. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for your time. It's never taken for granted. See you in the next review. Many more to come. I have so much more to cover. See you in the next one, and cheers.